oh, somebody's passed on. Suddenly, oh, well, we've got to go put a notice to the creditors in the newspaper, and oh, we got to go down to the courthouse and we got to fill out this paper. Whoa, 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 stop right there. Don't panic. Hi, Jeff Marsocci, the Plain English Attorney, and today we're going to talk about what happens when somebody passes on and suddenly you're trying to get together the estate. What do you have to do? This unfortunately comes up quite a bit. I've now been an estate planning attorney for more than 25 years, so clients pass on. A main focus for our firm is avoiding probate, but usually there's at least something that has to go into probate, and the people who are grieving the loss of a loved one suddenly are faced with, well, wait, we've got all this stuff we need to do. All right. The first thing is avoid what I call probate panic. Oh, somebody's passed on. Suddenly, oh, well, we've got to go put a notice to the creditors in the newspaper, and oh, we got to go down to the courthouse and we got to fill out this paper. Whoa, 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 stop right there. Don't panic. And that's exactly what it is. You need to approach this in a very organized manner. All right. So let me also put in here, I'm not going to be giving you any specific legal advice in this video. I can't. If you're my client, then we can talk individually. However, we're probably going to be sending a lot of our clients to this first video just to get the basics out of the way and see if there's anything else that we may need to do. But the first thing is you we have the big blue binder. If it's a trust or even a will, you may have the binder or you may just have the papers. It's what plan is in place and all of the ancillary stuff around it. So the big things for my clients, if they've got a revocable living trust or they've got the wills with us, this binder is there to help keep them organized. There's no guarantee they're going to actually put this stuff in, but there are a couple of things you should be looking at immediately. First, are there any funeral arrangements? The last section in the blue binder that we have for our clients has a place to put specific funeral arrangements. Now, some of our clients don't do anything with this section. Some people are very detailed. It may simply be our preference is burial versus cremation. Whatever they have is their choice. It's in that section. Some of our clients go a little bit further and they actually go to a funeral home and do a whole kind of pre-planning thing. And it's like, okay, that's where you want to put a copy of the end result. So you want to make sure you're not looking into the binder 8 or 9 days later, the funeral's already done and they had some very specific wishes and now you haven't done it. Okay. The other thing is, when you're checking in those first hours or first days, who's supposed to be in charge of all the financial stuff? Now, the way we craft things, the trustee, the executor of the pour-over will, the power of attorney, those are all the same list of people. So who's the person at the top of the list? Who's in charge? That's the person who should be working to have all the kind of financial arrangements and things with funerals. They should be the person who's in charge. All right, and then another thing just to check, because often they won't further down the road. If you've got a revocable living trust with us, there's a section that's pretty standard that the person may have left a personal property memorandum that gives specific items to specific people, and it's kind of considered off the top. This is not where people are going to put large sums of money. This is not where people are going to have, well, I want my house to go here. No, it's typically lower dollar value, highly sentimental items and family heirlooms that they want to go to specific people outside of their main trust beneficiaries. You want to check that and make sure that stuff is secured, put aside, and isn't going to be inadvertently sold or given to someone else. You know, I sometimes hear, well, look, we're just gonna go through the house, pick out the things you want. Well, wait, there might be things specifically that are supposed to go to specific people. All right, so that's within the first hours or day or two. The next thing that you really should do is secure assets. I'm not talking about getting control of bank accounts or anything like that. I'm talking about first hours. What do you need to do? Look, some of this may sound like common sense, but when people are going through grief, you just don't know how they're going to react. First thing, make sure that pets are somehow accounted for and being taken care of. All right, since we're talking about securing pets, this is Monty. He's actually our office cat. He does come home with me all the time, but this is, if anything happened to me, we'd want to make sure that Monty is well taken care of. And if he's not, he will be vocal about it. So, isn't that right, bud? Okay. Thought that would be a good break. This would also be a good opportunity. Please, if you're liking the information that you got, please like the video. It really does help us out. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you can keep getting this great information. Make sure things like vehicles, cars, that the person who's in charge, the trustee, the executor, whomever, that they have the keys to the vehicles. They're the ones who are going to end up being kind of financially responsible for making sure it's done correctly, that they have that stuff, and vehicles are safe. So they're parked in a good place where it's secure. You also want to make sure that any real estate is also secure, and any other valuables that may be laying around where people might be coming in and out of the house, that stuff also needs to be secured. Again, for a lot of my clients, they'd look at that and go, yeah, well, that's just basic common sense. But again, people are going through grief, and we're talking about the first day or two after something happened. All right, next thing, set an appointment with an estate administration or probate attorney. Don't do anything with the court. That's part of the probate panic, and unfortunately, part of feeding that probate panic, there are financial institutions and in particular banks. Banks will say, well, oh, I'm sorry, we can't give you access to this account. Oh, but we need the money to pay for the funeral. Look, that'll all end up getting worked out, but the bank will tell you, oh, just go down to the probate court and fill out some papers, then you get the letters testamentary, and then we can give you access to everything. Whoa, wait. What they're actually telling you to do is start a legal process that has to be finished and has to be done correctly. But because they need one piece of paperwork that's done at the beginning, hey, do that and we'll give you access. Like, it's no big deal for everything else that you're going to have to go through after that. And what you're going to have to correct if you got it wrong on the first try, which is, again, why we say, look, get an estate administration attorney or a probate attorney who's going to go through all of this and try to get it right the very first time. I want you to think about it like this, because again, the bank, all they want is the quote letters testamentary. They make it sound like it's a simple piece of paper that you get, but no, that's kind of like your license to grab assets that you are now a fiduciary and financially responsible for. The best analogy I can give for something like this is, okay, you need to open a bank account. You walk into a credit union and you say, look, I want to set up an account. And they go, oh, that's no problem. It's Navy Federal Credit Union. You just need to be a member of the military. Oh, well, I'm not a member. Oh, it's simple. Just go down to this recruiting office and sign all the paperwork. And as soon as you have your enlistment papers, we can set up this account for you. No big deal. What? You're signing on for years of military service to get this. And they're making it sound like it's, oh, well, it's just going and getting a piece of paper. No, it actually is a legal commitment. So don't buy any of that stuff and don't think that there's a quick solution necessary. That's where you're going to end up having the good advice of an estate administration and probate attorney. Now, when it comes to revocable living trusts, the whole idea is to avoid probate. But if you're not getting access to these accounts and you're the trustee and it's because, oh, this account isn't in the trust, it's unfortunately a common occurrence that people don't either fully fund their trusts up front, or over the years they change accounts and assets and they don't set them up in the name of the trust or set the beneficiary to be the trust or to be other people. So there are trusts that are unfunded or not at least fully funded out there. Now, let me put this in as another thing with the probate panic. If you go down to the newspaper office because you're going to put a notice to creditors in the paper because somebody told you needed to do that, well, they'll take your money and they'll run the notice, but then you go and you get the probate process started. They're going to reject that notice to creditors because it didn't have the probate file number and anything, and you're going to have to go and pay for it twice. Just throwing that in, it's almost an aside. Maybe I'll even edit that out and move it around, but if not, okay. So let's get back to the, don't do anything with the court until you're actually having an attorney help you out with this. But there may not be all that much that has to go through probate or anything at all if you've got a well-funded revocable living trust. So the point of the big blue binder is to keep things from having to go through probate if it's kept up with over time. All right, so the next thing is you need to gather financial information, and presumably this is a week or two or maybe even a little more. There's nothing that has to be done immediately. However, it should be done and started within a couple of weeks. All right, so now it's time to gather information on these assets. So I have a pre-appointment questionnaire that we used for estate administration work that helps you get organized for things like this, listing out information that the typical estate administration attorney is going to need. And when we're talking about different types of accounts, bank accounts, all right, what's the institution? What kind of account is it? Who owns it? Because that's going to end up being the critical thing. To see what's in probate, what's in the trust, what's payable upon death to named beneficiaries, or what was joint that had a right of survivorship. It's not all the same. So sifting through that and finding out which category they're in becomes critically important. The other thing is, I sometimes have people say, oh, well, we got this money let's pay for this debt, and that might not be the right thing to do, or it's going to create a lot more complications if there's something that has to go through probate. All right, I want to look at it this way. Let's say there are 3 people, they have stuff. Now you're in charge of either giving it to them or selling stuff and giving them the money, but they also have specific debts that need to be taken care of and paid for. And you've agreed that you're going to take on this project for these 3 people. There's Paul, there's Benny, and then there's Tristan. Paul, Benny, and Tristan. And you walk into this large room and there are all of these boxes with their stuff. And there's a box that's, okay, this is for Paul. You're not going to open up the box, see what's in it, and go, oh, okay, I'm going to take this and sell it and pay for a debt for Tristan. Or, well, okay, well, this is Benny's, but you know what? I don't feel like giving it to Benny. I'm going to give it to Tristan. No, you can't do that. Now, I use those names. Paul is what's in probate. So the assets that are in probate have to be accounted for as a whole for probate. Benny is a beneficiary. So if there are accounts that are payable upon death to beneficiaries, those aren't probate assets where the proceeds have to go into probate. If it's Tristan, well, okay, that's the trust. If there are assets in the trust, they're not going to be given to the payable upon death beneficiaries. That's got to go according to what the trust says. So figuring out which of these categories the assets are in becomes very important. All right, so everything is based on title for what is ultimately in probate. So if it's an account that was owned by the person who passed on, it wasn't payable upon death to anyone, it wasn't held joint with a right of survivorship, then it's in probate because probate needs to go through the process to retitle it in the names of the correct beneficiaries. Who are those beneficiaries? That's in the will. Now, when we do a will in combination with a revocable living trust, it just says the trust is the pay on death beneficiary. So that's exactly where it goes. It ends up going into the trust as part of this process. What if it was payable upon death to specific beneficiaries? Let's just say there's 3 kids. It's payable upon death to the 3 kids. That's not a probate asset. Oh, but the will says it gets divided this way. No, it goes according to what that pay on death designation said. So it's important to find out, was this payable upon death to specific individuals? Because then it doesn't end up in probate and the will doesn't control it. The other thing that I sometimes see is, oh, well, they named their 3 kids as the pay on death beneficiaries, but all of them are under 40 and the trust says that they don't get it until they're 40. Well, no, it doesn't go into the trust to have the age limits. It didn't end up in probate, which might have age limits. It goes according to the account rules, which is typically 18 or 21, but it bypasses probate. All right. And then what is in the trust gets governed by the trust. It's not part of probate. So you don't mix and match stuff. You have to be very intentional in making sure that everything kind of stays and is listed in the right category when you're putting together this type of paperwork. Now, a lot of attorneys are going to have their own forms. I've got a link to the form that we use that might be able to just help you get started. So then what are the next steps after you've got all of that? All right, well, that's when you meet with the attorney and go through that. Now, currently, my office isn't doing that estate administration work when it comes to probate. We can help with trust settlement and running through how does the trust get distributed and all that stuff. That we will do. Anything dealing with the probate court, we've got in the description below contact information for someone in North Carolina that we would recommend you get in touch with and see what needs to be done. But something I want you to realize, this is not usually something that's very simple. In some cases it is, but not always. This takes time. It's not like, oh yeah, I just go down to the courthouse and get the papers and then it's done. Again, like some banks or institutions may tell you, it's simple. It's simple for them to get their piece of paperwork. But remember, this is like enlisting in the military to get your account open. They're not talking about everything else that comes after that. And this can be a frustrating process. It can. It's not necessarily simple, which is why sometimes it's worth having an attorney help and handle the estate administration piece of this. All right, so now this is more specifically for our clients. What we're doing is, rather than trying to necessarily set a meeting with me at a high dollar per hour cost, this video may end up being enough to help get you started and going in the right direction. And if that's it, great. If not, then we're here. But we want you to at least go through this part and these steps, and it may be enough to get you going in the right direction with the right type of professionals to help you out. So I hope you found all of that information useful. We do have other resources. If you're viewing this and your goal is to avoid probate, well, there's our estate crash course at estatecrashcourse.com. And we also have our trust funding series, which is courses on how to make sure your trust stays properly funded or gets funded right from the start. So you keep up on these things and at least minimize or greatly minimize or eliminate whatever has to go through probate. And we've got links to that below as well. All right. So as I always tell my clients and I tell everybody else, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.